Welcome to WTF, Beautiful Souls, with me, your host, Vanessa Elston. This is a show where we look at how vibrational frequencies can help you recover from anything, any sort of trauma, any sort of drama in your life, and how engaging with the universe's positive frequencies can create a positive, a new and improved version of you, a destiny that you're in charge of. And today I've got an amazing guest, Richard Kaufmann, the comeback coach, veteran, public speaker, and author. And we're going to have a conversation today about what PTSD is and how he has mastered the frequencies of the universe to come out the other side absolutely thriving. So join me in welcoming Richard Kaufmann to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. You're such a blessing in my life. Thank you so much for being on my show. We're going to make it part 2 coming up. And thank you, Eric Allen, for the introduction and her episode. If you haven't listened to her episode with Eric Allen, oh my God, game changer. Make sure you check out that episode.
Oh, bless you, bless you. This is like a we love each other party, isn't it? And we do, which is great. I mean, from the first moment I got introduced to you, I really felt like we'd known each other for years. So I'm going to jump straight in today because I love your honesty and I love the fact that you just tell it how it is. So for our viewers watching, can you tell us in your own words what PTSD is and the types of people that are likely to suffer from it?
Post-traumatic stress, I don't like to call it a disorder because it's not a disorder. Post-traumatic stress is dealing with something that happened to us. And for me, because like I said, I have my own show. I think we've over 1,000 interviews with and everywhere from psychologists, and found out that PTS or post-traumatic stress is something that usually happens between the ages of 3 and 13. And then a lot of people, when you add war to the mix, or if you're a first responder or anything like that, that's where PTS comes from. But it's not just a veteran or a first responder. It could be abuse as a child. It could be a death in the family. It could be something that brought you pain that you haven't dealt with yet. So PTS is not, you hear people PTSD, oh, you must be a veteran or first responder. No, 80% of people deal with post-traumatic stress and we don't even know about it. We don't think about it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I deal with a lot of people that have experienced child abuse and, they are suffering from PTSD. But I, like you, never say it's a disorder because I don't like that word. It insinuates that it's something that can't be got over, that we can't change, that's innate to you. So I like the fact that you've taken that bit off the end. So tell me about how it can show up in your life, because the other thing I want to talk about today is how difficult it is if you're the partner of somebody suffering from PTSD, or if you're the partner or wife of a veteran coming back from war from the first time. When it starts to show up, what does it actually look like? And how is the best way to deal with it?
Well, unfortunately, everybody's different. Usually, if a child's been abused and they were outgoing and gregarious before, a lot of times they become withdrawn, or the opposite. If they were withdrawn before and now all of a sudden they're wild and out of control, maybe there's a reason, why it became. But everybody's different. For me, after everything I've been through, I realized that I've been through 2 marriages, I've been through multiple relationships, and I was the common denominator. So if everything in my life is crap and everybody around me don't like me and I'm the common denominator, well, then I'm the problem. And that's when I had to figure out, all right, you're the problem. Now we just got to figure out what's causing the problem and what I know that if I'm hungry, because I've been in recovery 30, going on 35 years without drug or alcohol. I know that if I'm hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, I'm heading for a relapse. So for me, I think a lot of it is getting to know what your triggers are. And the best way to see what your triggers are is ask the people around you, what do you see? And my wife really didn't notice it too much until we went to go see the movie American Sniper. And there's a scene where Chris Kyle, which, by the way, he's the reason I wear this hat. I promised his wife, anytime I go on a podcast, I'm going to wear his hat in honor of Chris Kyle. I'm not going bald, so that's the whole.
I love that. I love the fact that you just want to get that in there. I'm not bald. I've still got hair. Check this out.
But that's why I wear the hat in honor of Chris. But in the scene, he's actually watching a TV that's not even on, and he's having all these flashbacks. And my wife actually looked at me. She said, "Now I get it. Now I see. I could see it now. But if you don't know what you don't know, so that's why there's shows like this where we can tell you what to look for."
Now, we talked about this off camera that my ex-partner was in the army and suffered from PTSD, and one of the things that I would say is that people get sort of shark eyes. Like there's no emotion going on. And I think we talked about friends of mine went off to Northern Ireland as young boys, sort of 18, and they came back with these same eyes. It's like nothing registers anymore, nothing shocks, nothing, there's no emotion behind it. Can you tell me a bit more about that, your experience of that?
Well, in the States, and we call that the 1,000-yard stare, where, we're paying attention to everything, but we're focused on something. Like for me, like we went out to dinner last night, and I had to sit my back to the corner, and I'm listening to every conversation at every table behind me, because that's something that we're taught, that if we don't pay attention, we might die.
Yeah, and interestingly, you say that I sat with my back to the corner. It's always about getting out, isn't it? I mean, I used to notice with my ex, the first thing he'd do was like almost check all the exits, how many people they were, how in there, how quickly we could get out.
And, because then you're always like, well, then nobody can walk up behind me. So this way I can see the whole, and that's something that's ingrained in us. That's something that we're taught. And, once you're taught that, it's kind of hard to, we're always on hypervigilance, and that's part of PTS is always being hyper vigilant, and that's why a lot of us have nightmares. A lot of us can't sleep because we're listening for noises, and so that's something that gets ingrained in you, and you can't really shut it off.
Yeah, the can't sleeping thing is a really big one, isn't it? Because the slightest noise, and because you're on hyper alert, you're awake and ready to go straight away again. I mean, how do you deal with the lack of sleep? Because lack of sleep, obviously, we know it's used as a torture mechanism. Because if we deprive people from sleep, they're not themselves. How did you cope with that and overcome it?
Well, I do take melatonin before I go to bed every night. I do that. I stopped watching the news years ago, so I don't even do that. But I do something enjoyable before I go to bed. A lot of people say don't play video games before you go to bed. I do. It gives me peace. Let me think things out. But I also have something that I do that a lot of people started doing, that I taught them how to do it, and it changed their life. What I do is before I go to bed, I wrap my arms around my wife, whether she's sleeping or not, and I pray for my wife. I pray for her happiness. I pray for her health. And then I pray for my dog. She's laying next to us. But then I think it's 3 things that I'm grateful for that happened during my day. And I'm sure this interview is going to be one of the things that I say I'm grateful for. And then I pray, Lord. I say, Lord, thank you. Thank you for the day I've had. And then if I wake up in the morning and I can see something, because I lost 80% of my vision 3 years ago, if I could see something, I say, I actually yell out in my bed. I said, Lord, thank you. It's going to be an amazing day. So I believe if you go to bed with gratitude and wake up with gratitude, your day is going to be a whole lot better, and you're going to sleep a lot better. Because if you're thinking negative thoughts, you're going to dream negative dreams. But if you think talking about that vibration, if you start thinking positive before you go to bed, you're going to dream positive. And since I've started doing that 2 years ago, I haven't had one nightmare yet.
That's really interesting, isn't it? I met a lady who, when I was in Tenerife, I touched her hand and I wasn't, for whatever reason, I wasn't switched off like I normally am. And I said to her, "Oh my God, you haven't slept for like 35 years." And she said, "No, I haven't." And we got talking and I said, "Look, I'm a healer. You've helped me out getting an apartment." And she's been really kind to me. I said, "I'll give you a healing session." And her PTSD was because she'd been on the run from the Colombian gangs because her husband had run a club for one of them. They'd beat a lady up and he'd stepped in to make sure that she didn't get, to break up the fight, if you will. And they literally put a fatwa on them and she had to go on the run, straight away. She'd been running ever since. And I did a healing session on her and I went in the next day and she said, "That is the first full night's sleep I've had for like what seems like an eternity." And it's such a blessing when you can get to sleep when you've been haunted by events or anxiety and depression or PTSD. So melatonin's like an absolutely fantastic tool to do that. And I think you're absolutely right. Gratitude is the key to everything. There's so many people that just aren't grateful about the fact that they've just woken up for another day. And I guess that's something that one of your first blessings, having been in the military, thank God I'm still here.
I'm a gratitude guy. I'm very grateful for everything, even if it's, because like I live in a big house right now and I got a beautiful wife. I got 3 beautiful children, but 3 miles away from this house is the car that the parking lot I used to live in my car for a year and a half. So I drive by there every once in a while just to get my gratitude back and say, you know what? What I did is I actually changed my vibration, because this is what the show's all about. I changed my have tos to get tos. What I mean by that is about 8 months ago, I had to take the garbage out like I did this morning. It was raining and I'm mad and I'm pissed off and I'm kicking the garbage can. And then I looked at my house and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm taking the garbage out in front of my own house. And 3 miles from here, I lived in a car. So now when I take the garbage out, I say, you know what, Lord? I'm grateful I get to take the garbage out. So every time I hear myself say I have to, I hear the Lord saying to me, remember, you get to. You don't have to do anything. You get to it. It's a privilege. Because a lot of people that had plans for today didn't wake up this morning.
Yeah, that's so true. And it is being grateful for those little things, isn't it? So let's pivot here now, because you obviously suffered from PTSD and you were living, whatever happened to you, it led you to living in a car. So how did you make the decision to just change things? How did you do it? Because to most people, living in a car, you're totally on your uppers and you haven't got very many options. So how on earth did you change things?
Easy answer and the hard answer is my whole life changed at 8:46 on the Tuesday morning of September 11th, 2001. Actually, if I go stand on my porch, I'm actually in the shadows of where the Twin Towers once stood. And we knew people were in the buildings that day. And at 8:40, as soon as I seen the first tower hit, that's when I cried out to the Lord. I said, Lord, I want to dedicate the rest of my life to helping others that can't help themselves. But first, I need help. I need healing. And that's when I started doing it to find out the inner work of how I can help others. But, like even on my office here, I keep an empty cup here, even though it's my own logo and everything. But I keep an empty cup to remind me that I can't pour from an empty cup if mine's empty.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Because that, even like if you're a lifeguard, they teach you got to make sure that you're not drowning before you can help somebody else drown. So that's what I had to do. I had to start saying, okay, you want to help people, but you have to heal yourself before you can help others. And that started to be on my journey.
That's so interesting, because even though I knew I was a healer, it took being really, really ill for me to be stopped in my tracks, to stop me being a businesswoman and to get me back on the right track. And I remember when I was depressed and I really was overwhelmed by it, I prayed and I said, please show me what my purpose is. And whatever it is that I need to overcome, let me look at myself so that I can find the real me and love the real me so that I can share that love with everybody else. And you've talked about it a couple of times already. We've touched on it. In my world, we call it shadow work. You mentioned it earlier. You know, I had to look at me and say, why doesn't anyone like me? Why, you know, this unhappiness is all about me, actually. So talk to me about how you started that work. Because it's not very nice, is it? You have to look at yourself and say, not too impressed with that version of me.
Well, what happened was, I mean, this went over time. I had lunch with a gentleman and very big in the podcast industry, Mr. Gary Vaynerchuk, and he started the comeback. He's the one that actually started the Comeback Coach. He's the one that told me to write the book and to start the podcast. But he said, I want you to put all the dirty stuff you've ever done and put it out in book form and then start a podcast about it. And I didn't understand what he meant. And so I did it, obviously, because, hey, you know, you're Gary V, so I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do. But I had to go back when I was writing the book and go through my life and figure out where I was the wrong person, you know, things that I've done wrong. And so it ripped open a lot of scabs. And I had to go back because like I said, I'm in recovery 34 years. So I had to go back. And it's something that I teach them. I got a 12-week course that I teach. It's called the 3 Pillars of Forgiveness. First, I had to go back and ask for forgiveness for people that I've hurt, because hurt people hurt people. So I had to go and say, you know what, I'm sorry. You know, then I tried to make amends, and if I can't make amends, I tried. You know, and unfortunately, some people that we've hurt are no longer here. So sometimes you got to write letters or, you know, even an email and then delete it. But, you know, that's something that helped out. Then I had to, you know, I asked people to forgive me, and then I forgave people that hurt me. Because a lot of times we're holding on to anger. People don't even know we're angry at them. And something that somebody once said is kind of like me drinking the poison and hoping that they die.
That is so true. And with my clients, I think I've talked about this, you know, this comes up a lot with people. I might have even talked about it on my last podcast, is, you know, my clients, I said to them, right, we're going to do forgiveness now. And they say, no, I'm sorry, I can't forgive. And I'll say, hold on a minute. This forgiveness isn't for that person or the situation. It's you forgiving yourself for letting this have power over you, for letting this make you angry, for making you feel bereft of love, or, you know, hard done by, or it's the worst thing anybody could do for you. Because these people are off doing their thing. They're really not bothered. They've done whatever it is. What you've got to do is forgive yourself for letting it have power, for letting it rent space in your head, you know. And then they say, I can definitely do that if it's all about me. So it's quite funny the way people come at it.
The third part of the pillars is just exactly what you're talking about, is learning to actually forgive ourselves. Because again, hurt people hurt people. And for me, the way I look at it, and I tell my clients, it's kind of like walking on a treadmill. If you're just walking on the treadmill and you have a big rucksack on your back and you're continuously throwing rocks in it, eventually it's going to get so heavy you can't move. But if you're walking on your treadmill and you're forgiving people and asking forgiveness, you're taking bricks out of your backpack, and all of a sudden when it's empty, you're able to run again. So that's what the powers of forgiveness are, because it's you know, I always say that forgiveness is freedom. And, you know, even in the Bible, it said, you know, you have to, in order to be forgiven, you have to forgive. So I want to go to heaven, so I'll forgive everybody. The thing is, people say, well, I can't forgive them. Well, you can forgive them, but you don't have to forget them or excuse the action or let it happen again. There's a big difference between forgiveness and forgetting.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something I say to people, you don't have to forget, because you'd be totally stupid if you did. It's like putting your hand in the fire, isn't it? And burning yourself and then not being clever enough to sort of realize that you got burnt. And the other thing is that these people have come to teach you so that you can remember who you are and what your purpose is. And I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, you achieve amazing things in your life. You've achieved amazing things already. And you, from what you tell me, you're going to do amazing, even more amazing things going forward. But you've had a really tough life. And the reason you've had that tough life is because you're a warrior. And because warriors don't, you don't just become a warrior. You don't just get up and buy the gear, do you? And go, right, I'm a warrior. You've got to go out and hunt a few lions, and you've got to have a few scars to show for it. So toughen up, really, haven't you? And I think that's one of the things that we forget about the military, that you're all warriors. You've had to go and live on your nerves and live combat for 8 to 12 months, sometimes longer. And I think it's something you said earlier. They teach us how to go to war, but they don't teach us how to come back.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of us, when we get out of the military or even first responders, or anytime you hang up your uniform, you go from warrior to worrier. And all you're doing is, focusing on the bad stuff that we saw. But something that changed my life was something that one of my mentors, Ed Milet, told me. He said, nothing ever happens to you. It all happens for you. And that everything is a teachable moment. So I went back and thought, okay, every bad thing that's happened to me in my life, and most of it was caused by me. So I take 100% responsibility for anything I've ever done. But I realized that whatever happened, it's for a reason. And now my mess has become my message. So I think a lot of us, if we can just go back and start saying, okay, this happened, whether it's, if I'm abused, whatever, it wasn't my fault, but it happened for a reason, because maybe now I'm able to help somebody else that's going through it. So it's kind of like flipping the script. Instead of post-traumatic stress, now it's post-traumatic growth.
Oh, I love that. Post-traumatic growth. Right, well, that's a perfect point for us to take a break. And just a quick word from our lovely sponsors, My Lifespring. So everybody, please stay with us, because we are having an amazing conversation with Richard Kaufmann, the Comeback Page. See you in a bit.
Ignite your vitality. Meet the Lifespring Gold Card, a quantum leap in wellness. Revitalize your bioenergy, boost stamina, ease aches, and improve your mental focus. Shield yourself from electromagnetic frequencies emitted from cell phones, laptops, and other smart technologies. Restructure tap water, revitalize food, and harmonize everything around you. Elevate well-being with Lifespring, made in the USA. Order today from vanessaelston.com.
And we're back. Thank you so much for staying with us. I'm here with Richard Kaufmann, the Comeback Page, having an amazing conversation, a real deep dive, if you will, into PTSD. So, Richard, we left off on talking about lessons in life, about becoming a warrior, the difficulties in life, the challenges. You can go back and say, what was the learning from that you actually grow as a person? So in terms of your recovery and getting from that point where you were living in a car, we've talked about forgiveness, going to get forgiveness from people or to apologize for your actions, asking to be forgiven, forgiving yourself for letting those things have power over you. What were the next steps you took? Because it's a dramatic leap, isn't it, from where you were to where you are now?
Well, when I first started getting sober, which was in 1989, I almost went to jail for 5 years for grand larceny. And the police officer and I wish I could meet him, I would hug him, I'd kiss him and take him out for lunch. He was going to arrest me, but he's like, you know what? You're 20 years old. You're going to go to jail, prison for 5 years. He said, so you can either, give me the money back, which we finally paid back. And he said, you got to go to AA meetings for I think it was 90 days in a row. I think I hit like 300 meetings in a row, and I haven't had a drink since. But I had to change my life. I had to change the people I hung out with, the places I went. the things that I did, the things that I read, the people, things that I saw. So I had to pretty much reinvent and reimagine my whole life. But something that I'm taught in the program is that time takes time. So what that means is I can't change the past because I believe the past doesn't exist. I can't touch it. Tomorrow doesn't exist. I can't touch it, but I can touch right now. I can touch today, the moment that I'm in. So if I'm living a good life today and I keep doing that over time, then my whole life is going to change. But I can only do it today. And I think so many people focus, oh, I can't change in 30 years or 10 years. You don't have to change tomorrow. You just have to change what you're doing today. And like my friend James Clear wrote in his book, Atomic Habits, if you just change 1% a day in a year, you're a totally different person. So that's how we did it, one day at a time.
It's so true, isn't it? Just start today and just have that thought that I am going to change, that things are going to change for me. And I think it's getting your faith back in a lot of ways, isn't it? I mean, would you say that when you were drinking and you were taking drugs and all that sort of thing, that your faith had really gone out the window?
No, honestly, I think at some point, I think my faith was even stronger because even though I was acting stupid and doing stupid things, God kept me around for a reason. So even though I was messing up, he was kind of like that good, because when I pray, I say, I call him daddy. I said dad, because I didn't have a dad growing up. So I say dad, whatever it is, when I have my conversations with him, it's like talking to a dad. So sometimes he's just like, all right, I know you're screwing up, but we're going to get you back on the path again. Sometimes he'll slap me in my ass a little bit and say, all right, time to stop being stupid. But I always had that faith that, things are going to work out. Somehow things are going to work out. And it's faith over fear. And we were talking about earlier, I believe that everything you want in life is on the other side of fear. So once you can, like even like Rocky Balboa is called it Frankie Fear. Once you can defeat fear, then you're unstoppable.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? Because so many people, when you say, what are you really frightened of? And they tell you, and you say, they say they've got a very comfortable life, and they say, I'm terrified of being poor. I'm terrified of my husband leaving me. I'm terrified of losing my job, my status, my reputation, and what have you. And it's like, realistically, those things aren't really going to happen. And the more you feed that fear, the more you can make those a reality, can't you? And it must be really difficult having been in service, and you've lived on your nerves and in fear all the time. Is it fear of battle, or is it fear of, because you talked about, the teachers have to be soldiers, but they don't teach us how to come back. Is it getting rid of that fear that you've brought back with you, or is it fear of just normal things that you just don't deal with when you're a soldier?
Well, I think for me, something I took a deep dive about 3 or 4 years into mindset. So I went all the way back to the early 1900s with, Mr. Carnegie and, Think and Grow Rich, all that stuff. And then when I started learning about the reticular activating system in the brain, that, whatever you search for, you're going to find. So if I tell all my clients, I'm like, don't ever tell people, what you don't want. Like, I don't want my wife to cheat, I don't want to lose my job, because you're putting that out into the ether. So I always say things that I do want. So it's a little like, I do want to have an amazing wife and an amazing relationship, instead of putting, I don't want to get divorced or get, cheated on. Well, because you're putting that out into the ether. So whatever you put out there is coming back, because life's going to give you exactly what you ask for. So I think, once you change the vibration and start saying, okay, I don't say the word don't, I don't say the word can't. So like even when I had Mr. Richard, Robert Kiyosaki and Sharon Lecter on, that was one thing they said is they stop saying the word don't or can't, because you're going to get out of life exactly what you ask for. It's going to give you.
So true. And people say to me, you need to understand it's really difficult. I say, no, it's not difficult. It's challenging. And challenge is all about growth. But if you say it's difficult, you're going to find it difficult. You're going to become frustrated. You're ushering in all these negative, we've all tried to put IKEA furniture together, haven't we? And, you become angry and frustrated. And you normally end up smashing it to bits. Well, I would say it's a bit like that, really. If you say something's going to be difficult, I always imagine IKEA furniture. But actually, if you bother to read the instructions and get some decent tools out, even I can knock it up in, a few minutes, providing I don't unpack it and think, oh, this is going to be difficult. And the same's true of life, really, isn't it? What are we really scared of? And I guess for you guys, it's like, well, I'm going to go for an interview, but if I don't get it, nobody's going to kill me. Or I suppose you have a different view of life, do you? Because I always say to my clients, why are you so frightened of this? It's not going to stop you breathing, even if it goes wrong. You're not going to be on the floor unconscious even. You're just going to have had a bit of disappointment, brush yourself up and get up again and have a go at something else.
Well, and I guess, like, for instance, like when I moved here and I got married to my wife, she'd be mad and because she's driving and getting mad at everybody. And I'm like, if there's not IEDs going off around us, what's the problem? What's the problem? What's the stress point? I don't see it. And I think a lot of veterans or a lot of civilians take a lot of stuff for granted. Like for, a lot of soldiers over in Afghanistan or Iraq, they seen children drinking out of moats. They see, people that don't even have running water. There's no electricity, there's no internet. So when our Facebook goes down for a couple hours, everybody's freaking out. And a lot of the veterans are going, really? This is what we're really worried about? So I think we do have a different perspective. But also, if you're somebody like me that had an incident happen on duty and it's life-threatening, and like I got a traumatic brain injury, it kind of switches everything perspective in life to where, like the great, poet, Mr. Jim Morrison of the Doors once said, nobody gets out of here alive. All right, guys, nobody gets out of here alive. So enjoy the life that you got. And I think that once you, like for me, every day that I get to wake up, and I wasn't supposed to make it. So now that I'm here, I'm grateful for every day. So I think a lot of veterans have that perspective also, and first responders, because they see stuff and do stuff that should never be done. And that's something I'd like to really talk about as we go on is, a lot of us, like I said, see stuff and do stuff that no other human being is supposed to see or do. And we can't go home and talk to our wives, boyfriends, husbands about what we just saw. So a lot of that, we don't, a lot doesn't really even get talked about.
And, I totally get what you're saying, because I was in Harrods when the bomb went off. And, I have that same attitude now. Is the building going to blow up? Well, I'm fine then. Is anyone being blamed for bits? Well, we're all fine then, aren't we? So let's just move forward. But let's just talk about that, not having anyone to talk to about things that are so traumatic that you've seen. If you are somebody that's suffering from this, where should you go to find help?
Well, in the States, you can dial #988, which actually it's a helpline that you can actually call into. A lot of times it's just finding somebody that's like me, that, they're willing to sit and talk. So I always tell everybody, I got big shoulders and I got big ears. So I may not have all the answers, but I'm just willing to sit and talk and listen. Because sometimes a lot of people, they don't want to hear your opinions. They don't want to hear you trying to help. They just want somebody to be able to sit there and listen. And I'm the kind of guy that, like we talked on the show, like after what happened with Princess Di and Dodie, there was a level of PTSD that had to go on with that. But you found out people to talk to and you were able to work your way through it. So I think, just having somebody, that you can talk to that is not going to be judgmental. Like me, I've screwed so much up in my life. I have zero to be judgmental about. So I tell everybody, if you need somebody to talk to, I got you. Let's go out for lunch, or just message me, Zoom call. So I'm that kind of guy that, I'll be there just to listen. I'll give you my advice if you ask, but either, try to find somebody that you can trust, or try to get professional help. I've been seeing the same therapist going on 12 years. And I believe that, even therapists have therapists. Just like, I'm a comeback coach. I have coaches that coach me. So I think if you want to get the best in life, like I have a coach for business. I have a coach for physical. I have a coach for relationships. So I have a bunch of coaches in my life. And I think that's why I'm keep on moving up, because I'm teachable, but I'm willing to say, hey, I don't know what I don't know. So teach me what you know. And, be humble and teachable. And I think, for me, that's the biggest thing. If I'm going to tell anybody, if you want to succeed, life, business, relationships, be humble and be teachable.
I'd agree with that, because I'm always learning, and I love learning. I need more data all the time. I want to know about new stuff, even in my own, healing realm. I'm always looking to improve. I'm always looking to find out more information on that. And that's why I work with a couple of quantum scientists, because it bridges the gap between what I do, which a lot of people call woo-woo, and healing, and what is actually there in terms of quantum science. The fact that we healers call it the aura, and quantum scientists call it the morphogenetic field. And when my clients come to me with PTSD, I do a very different, offer a very different service to you, because I'm looking to get them out of that anxiety and depression, to shift them so that they can probably work with someone like you to then rebuild their lives. But it's that initial shift from I'm on the floor and I can't get up to, I'm standing straight up, I want to move forward again. And I think it's really interesting that you mentioned the need to talk, because what I do doesn't actually require anybody to speak. I'll just say to somebody, is that right? Have I got that correct? And they just need to say yes. And most of my clients are quite happy with that. But when I'm dealing with people with PTSD, it's quite interesting, because generally they're really tough, big macho guys, occasionally women. And they're the ones that talk the most once they feel comfortable and they trust me. We quite often have to book an extra half an hour or an hour, because they just haven't actually ever spoken about the experience that is at the root of all their problems. And the relief they feel from just having talked about it is immense, and it's very often quite shocking what they've had to witness. And the energetic results of that are generally guilt and shame. Guilty that they got out and other people didn't, guilty that they've had to take other human lives to survive. Would you say that's something that most people with PTSD wrestle with?
Yeah, because it's kind of like, and I tell everybody, it's kind of like in your house, if you don't relieve the pressure of the water in your house, a pipe's going to explode. So it's the same way with somebody. If they're able to talk, they're able to relieve some of that pressure, and they're not going to explode as much. But, as you're talking, I'm thinking about it, because a lot of people that I've talked to, like you said, we've lost people, we've lost friends. I know of two people personally that I was helping go through PTSD, and they still took their own lives.
Oh, that's terrible.
But, I sometimes I don't think of the thousands of people that I've helped, but I think of the two people that I've lost. And then also, like we were talking about earlier, like I got a friend, he was a prosecutor here. He used to be on homicide, where his wife he'd come home and say, honey, how was your day? and he just came back from a quadruple homicide involving children. How are you going to tell your wife, yeah, well, I just came back from a quadruple homicide involving 2 underage children? So he just says, it was okay. How was your kids today? And then they bottle it up. And then, and I don't know if anybody knows this, but the average life expectancy of a male in the United States is 78. The average life expectancy of a veteran or first responder is 58.
Really?
So there's a 20-year difference because of all the stress that we hold in. And, because stress can come out in drinking, drugs, smoking, food, sex. It can all come out different ways. So, if we can relieve that pressure of the pipes, then we'll be able to live longer because we're not going to have that pipe bursting. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. And again, going back to the clients I've helped with PTSD, they're always the ones, and you'd think it would be women actually, but it's not. It's generally they who want the extra hour access a week, to just send messages. And sometimes I get messages at 3 o'clock in the morning, saying, I'm experiencing this, and I'll send healing to them for that moment of time, to help them sleep or to help them just calm down again. But I think the thing that's really interesting here is that finally people are more willing to talk about it, aren't they? Finally, people are more willing to try something different, to try coaching, to try, kind of see someone as woo-woo as me, And what would be your suggestion to anyone that's watching this right now who's suffering from PTSD as sort of first steps to recovery, first steps to shifting out of it? Because you are a beacon of hope to everybody that's going through it right now.
Thank you. Well, what I did is, because when I got hurt on duty, I lost 80% of my vision. I started a podcast. And my first guest was somebody, he's a quadruple amputee, and he's skiing in Aspen with his family, sitting in a jacuzzi overlooking the mountains. And I'm like, wait a minute, hold on a second. Quadruple amputee, he's skiing in Aspen. And that's when I decided, okay, there's other people that got it worse than me. How are they dealing with it? And like, I just interviewed a gentleman, I think he'd be great for your show. His name is Aaron Hale. He just finished running. It's called the Badwater 135. It's a race in, I forget which desert, but it starts at 200 feet, negative 200 feet, and ends up at 8,200 feet. And it's 135 miles in the desert in July. He's blind and he's deaf. And it's
hot as hell, right? In July, it's not,
So I look at people like that, and then I start, doing backwards research, and I'm like, all right, how did he deal with it? How did he deal with the PTSD of going blind and deaf? So that's what I did. I suggest anybody find somebody that you can relate to that have overcome PTS, and find out how they did it.
Interesting. What you're saying really is there's plenty of beacons of hope out there, plenty of exemplars like that man, quadruple amputee running in the desert. You're just skiing. You can't imagine it, can you? And yet, as humans.
But at that point, I'm thinking, okay, I'm 80% blind, but I got both arms, I got both legs. I could do better. So that's when I just started to saying, okay, that was the impetus of the show, is watching people overcome and what their stories are. And it's free. If you have a smartphone or even a computer, you can find all this stuff out. Even just put in, people who have overcome post-traumatic stress, and thousands of people will show up. So all you have to do is click on one of them, see what they did, and start doing what they do. Like for me, I'm trying to become better at podcasting. Eric is one of my mentors, and he just put out an ebook yesterday. I bought the ebook. I read the whole thing in like an hour, and I implemented like 5 things that he taught me just because I see what he's done. So, and I see how successful he is. So now I start using it in my life. You know what I mean? So sometimes we just have to figure out, okay, what did you do? How did you get there? Let me start implementing what you're doing. So I think that would help out a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Look for an exemplar, look for somebody much worse off than you that's done something incredible, and then say to yourself, well, why am I still in victim mode, really? And it's harsh, to say to people, you're acting like a victim. At the top of I talk about energetic pillars. At the top of the energetic pillar of that one is warrior. At the bottom is victim. Where are you? Which one are you going to be? So you've got to step forward and enjoy the gifts that you've been given. So that's one thing that people should do. In terms of finding someone to talk to, what would you suggest for people? I mean, there's churches have organisations, don't they? I always find the church is a great place to sort of start. There's plenty of people, plenty of different coaches online. What would you suggest?
Find somebody that you can relate to, because I can't relate to a 20-year-old kid that tells me he's a life coach. What, you're 20 years old. Now if you're a health coach and you're shredded and that, yes. But if you're 20 years old and you're going to tell me I'm 54, how to have a better marriage and you're not even married, then me and you can't jam, because I can't relate. So for me, I try to find somebody that can be relatable, somebody that I can say, all right, I can sit down and I can talk to you because I want what you have. I can't, like, for me, I know that, like you said, and I use it. That's actually the tagline of my podcast is, like Joel Osteen says, you can either be the victim or the victor. I choose to be the victor. But so find somebody that you can jam with, somebody that you can say, okay, I want what they have. So I'm going to find out what they do. And I'm going to reach out. I might reach out and just say, hey, I love everything you're doing. Thank you so much. I love the stuff that you're doing. I love to hop on. I love to buy you a cup of coffee, or I would love to take you out for lunch or anything like that. And you're not asking for anything. You're just saying, I'd love to thank you. Because people love to be thanked. They love to be appreciated. And then if you ask them, listen, I need a mentor. Like when I asked Eric, I said, Eric, I'm new at this. I love what you're doing. Would you mind mentoring me? He stepped in and he said, yeah, I'll mentor you. And we've had a great relationship since, but I had to humble myself and say, Eric, you got a great marriage. You got a great business. I want to be a lot like you. Can you show me how? And he did. So sometimes I think you got to find somebody that you can jam with. Ask them, how do you do it? Because I knew I had a friend. He was a billionaire, and we were playing cards one night, and I asked him, I'm like, so tell me about your business. He's like, you know what? He's like, I've been in business 20 years. I've had people come asking me for jobs, for money, but I never had anybody come and ask me how I did it.
That's incredible, isn't it? Because whenever I meet anybody that's like a billionaire, I'm like, so how did you do it? Especially if they've come from nothing. It was like, how did you make all that happen? How did you make those serendipitous occasions present themselves to you so that you could move forward? That's incredible. But I love what you say about finding the person that you can jam with, because a lot of people come to me and they say, listen, I'm from New York or what have you. I've done it with a couple of rappers. They're like, am I okay to swear in front of you? I'm like, good God, yes. I'm from South London. You can say whatever you like. And I used to work in the construction industry. I find it shortcuts things. So it is really important that you find the right person, because you're going to be really vulnerable, aren't you? And I think that's one of the things that you guys are really good at, because going into battle, you are incredibly vulnerable, aren't you? People don't ever sort of think of it like that. The moment you step out, you're vulnerable, aren't you?
Yeah, well, because most of I joined when I was 17. This is years ago. But your life changes when you sign your life insurance at the age of 17. There's a big mindset shift when you realize, you just wrote out a check to the government up to and including your life. So it's a big mindset shift. But something that you just said is, we are vulnerable, but only to our team. Like my guys on my tank, when we were together, we knew everything about each other. We knew about the relationships, good, bad. We were a band of brothers, literally. So we were vulnerable to us, but we were not vulnerable to everybody else. And the thing about being a band of brothers is I know my friend's got my back. He's got my left, he's got my right, he's got my back, and he's got my front. I know that I'm safe with them. They got my back, I got theirs. And then when we get out, we don't have that. We don't have the guy in the front, back. Now we're total vulnerable because now we don't have anybody watching our we call it we call it having your six. So it make 6 o'clock on the clock. So when you get out, we don't have anybody watching our back. And that's when we become really vulnerable and really scared.
That's so sad, isn't it? And I've heard that over and over again. I miss my band of brothers. I don't have that backup in the civilian life. But sadly, we're coming to the end of our show now. But just very quickly, I know that a lot of veterans I know have found their new band of brothers in Facebook, in community groups, in their locality. People are spread all over the place. I mean, would you recommend, reach out and find a new band of brothers? Because it's a private club, really, isn't it? Unless you've served, you can't join.
No, it's true. And I tell everybody, and me and my wife just had this conversation yesterday. We were talking. If you're going to be if you're a veteran, and if you're or a first responder, and if you're going to start a business or something new, the people in your immediate circle will not have your back. They will not support you. It's going to be your band of brothers that will support you. So reach out. And sometimes, like I tell everybody, when I moved to New Jersey 13 years ago, I knew nobody but my wife. And now I have thousands, hundreds of thousands of friends but I realized that in order to have a friend, I had to be a friend. And I had to be vulnerable. And like I'm totally honest, up and honest. I'll tell people, listen, guys, I'm having a bad day. And people will just reach out and be like, hey, I'm having a bad day too. So I think you have to be vulnerable and build your tribe, because like the show's all about, your vibe is your tribe, and you'll find your tribe once you find your vibe.
That is so true. So true. Your vibe will find your tribe. So make sure you're vibrating on the right frequency, everybody. Richard, I'm so sorry that we've come to the end of our show. We could talk forever. And, I wish you lived around the corner so we could continue this conversation over a cup of coffee. But I'm sure we're going to speak very soon.
Yes, we are.
This is Richard Kaufmann, the comeback coach. He's here to help you. If you're suffering from PTSD, if you're an ex-veteran, get in touch with him. He is the man that will be able to change your life and give you some amazing advice and some top tips for you starting to make that shift today. This has been WTF, What's the Frequency? Richard, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. And I just want to wish everybody a beautiful day in love and light.